Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and happy Thursday. Is it Thursday already? My goodness, the week seems to keep flying by. It's kind of a decent day here in New Hampshire. A little sun, little rain. I had some really great weather the other day. It's starting to feel like summer. Things are coming along. So we're really excited today to have back again Frank and Wayne talking about this whole kind of thing about pen testing, vulnerability management, all the things around Nmap. Wait, no, we're not talking Nmap. Let's take an opportunity for Mr. Wayne to come on up and say hello. How are you? Kind of what do you do all over there?
Hey everyone, I'm Wayne Proctor. Very glad to be here today. I'm a cybersecurity consultant serving as a virtual CISO working for IGI Cybersecurity. Really great position. I get to use my background as a CISO. I've been CISO over the last 20 years for 6 different companies. The largest would be UPS. And as a virtual CISO, it's exciting because I'm helping companies to mature their security programs and use my background. So I'm really glad to be here today and hope you guys get a lot out of this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And of course, Mr. Wayne, come on up, my friend.
Being Frank?
Yeah, didn't I just say Frank? We just had Wayne. I'm moving Frank over.
But you said to say what you said. Anyway, yeah, guys, I'm Frank Raimondi. I'm VP for Channel Alliances and Partnerships for Nodeware and for IGI Cybersecurity. So kind of the 1-2 punch that we do. So I manage working with distribution, some key partners, but really focused on integration alliances and partnerships like with Compliance Scorecard, enabling an MSP to have an easier path to the solution, right? So not having to do the work yourself to get the data into a compliance reporting tool like TIMS or others. So we did one last week. We'll do another one next week, which will be a little bit more focused on the vulnerability management side of the equation. But excited to be here today and have a good discussion with everybody.
So much. Thank you, Tim. I'm going to introduce Frank. Wait, hold on. Kidding, right?
Moving that script now, Tim. Got to get to real time.
Wait, my AI prompt just went berserk. It must have been some vulnerability that happened to it or something.
We better put some Nodeware on your system there.
I don't know, Nodeware, yeah, all the things. So, hey, everybody, good afternoon. Tim Golden, founder of Compliance Scorecard, where we help bring that risk conversation in your MSP and have that conversation with your client by keeping your risk in check. We're very excited today to dive into our second session all around penetration testing, vulnerability management. As people start to trickle in here, feel free to kind of jump in on some comments. We know this whole thing about pen test and vulnerability management, and are we just running an Nmap scan or doing a dig or some stupid little automated burp suite thing, or what are we doing? What is an actual pen test, right? And so Frank and I kind of wanted to do a quick little recap of kind of where we came from, talk about the previous session and kind of re-level set to where we started from and where we're headed.
Yeah, let me kick that off. So there are a lot of vulnerability assessments and vulnerability management, and it's been very commonly sort of mixed into use or overused relative to penetration tests. And some of that comes from some tools out there that are kind of automated. They call themselves a penetration test, but they're really kind of a one potential test or an assessment versus a real test from an outside. So again, last week we really kind of wanted to identify the differences, right? So an assessment is one in kind of an internal look excuse me, at what devices could be exploited, right? And what inventory do you have, and just really understanding what the current situation that an MSP can see and their customers can see. Penetration test, again, really is the outside trying to exploit what those devices are found. And so exploitation is really good. And our colleague Ismail discussion around sort of comparing to a military, right? You think about, an assessment is you're looking at your troops, you're looking at your equipment, you're looking at all the interdependencies and the mapping of things. But when you really go to put that into a test of those resources and of those strategies that you've done, then putting it into a mock battle. And here's an example of bringing forces together in friendly fire kind of testing, right? And that's really what a penetration test is. And again, Wayne will get into this more detail, but really the combination is really the valuable piece here from a strategy and a delivery of cybersecurity. And I think, Tim, kind of into where you're seeing from the compliance requirements, right? It used to be just vulnerability assessment was as the check mark, right? And now they're really asking for vulnerability management and continuous, if even more being restrictive and prescriptive, excuse me. And so back to you, Tim, a little bit in terms of what you're seeing and what we talked about last week from a compliance and what you're seeing and what you're delivering, I guess.
Yeah, I really like how you use the word assessment, right? And testing, right? Because, they mean very different things, right? And when we think of like vulnerabilities, for example, we want to be, you could almost use the same word assessment with penetration assessment, vulnerability assessment. Not that those words are interchangeable. The industry always talks about penetration testing, but really it goes beyond just that automated scan of finding a thing, right? As we kind of talked about last week, we really want to be able to not just discover and assess the vulnerabilities, but then the penetration testing is the actual act of trying to actively exfiltrate or using those vulnerabilities as a way to get into stuff, break stuff, do stuff, right? And so the assessment part can identify the areas in which you're vulnerable, but penetration testing, penetration assessment, penetration hacking, penetration, all the words, is the actual ability to take those vulnerabilities and exploit them. Right? You made the military reference. We talked about that a little bit last week where, we were doing the joint readiness training and like you saw here in that picture, the enemy was going to come attack us. And we had our foxholes and we had our lines of sight and our crosshairs to be able to cross field of fire. And what we had realized was they were too far apart. And so the cross was like way out in the distance as opposed to in the kill zone. And so they were actually able to infiltrate us. They found the vulnerability. They noticed that, they're too far apart. So there was only a small apex of where that crossfire could come in. And if they could break that little spot right there, then they had the whole field of fire to come after us. Right. So if I'm thinking about how does this apply as an MSP, I'm going to do some vulnerability stuff. I'm going to do some management to discover where those intersections are and those points of potential access. And then I'm going to bring somebody in like a Wayne, right? I'm going to bring a company in like a vCISO or an actual like enemy to try to exploit that and get through those enemy lines. So when I think of this in vulnerability and penetration testing, I think they actually go hand in hand. Absolutely. Discover what the stuff is, and then try to actively exploit it, again, within scope of work and permissions. And we're going to get into all that fun stuff. So,
well, I think the third piece of that is, right, so you do the assessment, and Wayne will talk about this from the process, but then you do the pen test. And then you need to be using the vulnerability management ongoing between pen tests so that you know your progress towards those things you identified, right? Because it's a full loop of activities that are required here. So So
two truths and a lie. Well, yeah, because there are a lot of myths in penetration testing, right? There's a lot of like, a couple of truths and a lie. Tell me about that. I'm actually going to make this full screen so that everybody can see it better.
Yeah.
Frank, if you want, or Wayne, either one of you want to
let's have Wayne do this one.
Yeah, I'll jump into this. So this is the revealing the truths, or what sounds more fun, myth busting, like the television show. So I'll just go through this fairly quickly, but these are some of the myths and truths that are probably most commonly talked about. First one here, talking about the myth that pen testing only identifies vulnerabilities. And like Frank was talking about in the beginning of the presentation, the vulnerabilities, if you're just identifying vulnerabilities, that's your vulnerability assessment. But with pen testing, you go further than that. You have to know the vulnerabilities so you can try to exploit them and see in your unique environment, can you exploit those? But it's really just goes a lot beyond just finding vulnerabilities. It's that testing of if it can happen in your environment. The next one on here, pen testing only involves IT systems. I mean, that traditionally that's what we talk about. When most people say, let's do a pen test, you get back results of how effective your ability to exploit the vulnerabilities were on IT systems. But you could be testing the physical building. Can someone gain entry to the building or to the data center? You could also look at social engineering testing. How well do people respond to different types of attacks, trying to trick them? Overall employee awareness. There's a lot of other angles you can take, and we'll talk about that a little further in the presentation. The next one is ethical and malicious hackers use the same methods. So they use a lot of the same methods of attack, but it's real important to remember that the ethical hackers really adhere to set rules of engagement. You really want to make sure you minimize your possible impact on business operations during this testing. So that's what those rules of engagement enforce. Next one here is only large enterprises need pen testing. Really what we're doing is seeing if vulnerabilities in your environment can be exploited. That doesn't matter if you have 2 computers or if you have a huge environment with multiple facilities. You really want to do pen testing. You get the benefit. And really the pricing for pen testing is, changes based upon the size of your environment. So
scope. It's all about scope.
Right. And the last one on the list here, pen testing often disrupts the business operations. We did say already that you have rules of engagement. So really, if you well plan and you partner with your customer about the testing that's going to be happening, you can really lessen any types of impact on the business. And if you think there's going to be an impact, you can plan what that impact could be and how you're going to respond to that.
Interesting. So, we do hear a lot of these myths, right? Like, oh my gosh, I can get a, automated, or I can get a penetration test for a couple of bucks an hour, whatever, right? And having gone through these exercises way too many times, and having tried to put out these scopes of work and actually doing our own and going through that, like, first and foremost, hire a third-party company. And there's a lot of them that that we work with, Wayne, others. There's a lot that first of all, hire the expert, determine the right scope, right? As we've been kind of pushing towards our ISO and SOC 2, the penetration conversation comes up a lot, and we're looking at building that out. And we talk about the scope. We talk about how many endpoints. We talk about how many roles. We talk about lateral movement, vertical movement, right? All those things of vulnerabilities are discovered, but how are they going to be actively exploited, right? Not just by us, because we're doing our things, we're scanning our stuff, we're doing our due diligence, But how would an actual hacker, bad actor, person, whatever, take advantage of whatever the exploits that could be there and actively go after them, right? I think that's the most important thing about when we're thinking about a penetration test, right? There's a ton of great tools, Burp Suite, and the list goes on and on about trying to find potential breakpoints in different things, whether it's a SaaS application or a firewall or whatever. And so automated tools are great and they have their place. But putting a human behind that, putting the mind and the thought process of people that have been doing that kind of ethical hacking for years, probably going to get much more deeper and better results on an actual penetration test, right? So in my opinion, using a free tool or, an inexpensive automated thing is great, but you have to back it up by the humans, right? You have to be able to just look at it from, a logical perspective and put the people there, right? Frank, do you have anything to add? Any other truths and lies that you might want to add?
Well, how about once a year a vulnerability assessment's all I need.
Yeah, once a year. How about just once ever on a penetration test as opposed to once a quarter or once a year? I only need to do it once.
Yeah, that's all they told me I needed to do it. That's all I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And one thing to add, Tim, to your comment on using an external expert company for your pen testing, that's actually something that's called out in requirements and frameworks. A lot of them actually say, just don't do a pen test, get pen test done by an external party. Yeah. So that's, something that is not just a best practice, but it's actually a requirement for a lot of companies.
Yeah, and we're probably going to get into the requirements here in a few minutes, but you did have some interesting statistics here. I didn't know if you wanted to chat quickly about these before we kind of dig into the requirements.
Yeah, I wanted to share this. This is our results from this year, so it's very fresh information from the Cobalt State of Pen Testing report. And some interesting things here. When we look in the past, we saw what are the real objectives? Why are you doing pen testing? A lot of companies would say, oh, compliance, I have to. But, it's changing. You can see here now, like the top reason, most common, is that there's specific vulnerabilities I want to look for. And that comes out if there's, vulnerabilities that are like really making an impact. Maybe it's something new that just came out. The exploit is just available. It's really causing problems across companies. It is something valuable to you if you can look and see, well, do I have that one specific problem or a few specific problems? So that's right now on the top of the list. But if you look through here, there's a lot of reasons. Even the one on the bottom is becoming more important. That's like if I'm looking to purchase another company, should I consider their security level in my factoring of if I want to buy them or not? And this would be a great way to do a pen test and just see, because when you do a pen test, the results will really make it clear to you what kind of security are they actively maintaining in their environment, because the results will show that. So Tim, I don't think we need to go through all these. People can read them. But
one of the things that's standing out to me here, right? And it's kind of interesting that it's only at a 42%, which is the testing of the access management, right? Because that's really like checking for vulnerability, like doing the other things, but it's this whole idea of only 40 some odd percent said, like, that means 60% of like don't care or report. Like, that's kind of a really interesting number to me, because thinking about only 42% or 40 some odd percent of actually testing the access management, like pretty much every penetration test for the last several years I've been part of, it all based on what roles are we testing? How many roles are we testing? What lateral and vertical ways those roles can get into stuff, right? Like when we scope that out and we hear that conversation, it's all about the access management. So to see that at 42% is maybe a little concerning. I mean, I get checking for specifics, but truth be told, the checking for specific vulnerabilities should be part of that quote, quote, automated stuff. It's the testing of those, the actual act of going after those vulnerabilities. Like things like nodeware and whatnot, you can find that stuff. But the testing of that stuff in a penetration test, I think, is what's key here, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the other crossover kind of related to that, right, is the third-party risk management, right? Sort of the increasing requirement in the NIST CIS, right? I mean, you need to know who has access to your data and who you have access to theirs. I mean, it's a huge requirement coming forward and coming strongly now that's in that mix. So. Wayne, I mean, you're getting more and more certified on third-party play as well, right?
Yeah, and actually, it's true. You could say all these are important, and they're a different level of importance based upon the company's objectives. I was just looking while you were talking, Tim, at the second one we didn't talk about, but the second one was about testing of your cloud environment. That's interesting because that's an environment that you don't own. So you don't have as much control over it. So it brings you a lot of value to understand, the risk in the cloud environment since you don't fully own that environment.
So Daniel brings up a good point here, right? About only checking for specifics. Quick little read here as I read. Well, Wayne or Frank be thinking of a response, right? It would be great if a company realized this, and instead of assessing and analyzing their environment and technologies for the types of things and associated risk, then at the very least, test for those, right? I love that he calls out Apache struts. Coming from the years ago, building Java-based or web-based and using Apache struts or Tomcat for that matter, there's a lot of stuff to consider there, right? And so, checking for specifics, right? It was the highest thing on the list, right? So, Daniel makes a really good point here. Any thoughts, Frank, Wayne?
Well, I think it's a super good point raised, and my discussing those points and that one as the highest on the list wasn't saying that you should consider only doing that. You really should be testing across your environment. But I think that's on the list as just something that's really come up in priority that people do want to do that. Hopefully that's not the only thing they're doing though. They're looking at all different types of risk across the environment.
Yeah.
So I just had, there it is, the requirements. So we kind of mentioned this. I want to make sure I have the right slide up there. We kind of mentioned this a few minutes ago. I'm just going to pull this up here, right? And truth be told, we hear this all the time. Do we really need to do this? Do our customers need to do, really? Yeah. So Frank, Wayne, before I jump in, because I've got some very specific things I want to kind of point out.
I'll let Wayne go ahead.
Yeah, it's not as black and white as it says on this chart or in the slide, but there's certain requirements that, and if based upon what your company is looking to achieve, it may be required that you do pen testing. Kind of the poster child for that is the first one with PCI. If you want to be able to use credit cards to accept payments, you need to, follow and comply with the PCI requirements, one of which is that you have to do pen testing. So in that one, it is black and white. Other ones like the CIS requirement that you do it and the CMMC requirement that you do it, they are required if you want to be compliant with those frameworks. You do need to do that, but it's at different levels. Like what level do you want to comply with? And then you need to be compliant. But it's interesting companies can look across this list, and a large number of companies, a high percentage, would somehow fall into that hard requirement category. So compliance is driving a lot of the people to want to do pen testing.
I might. I wish. Where's my good friends at Fifth Wall, or Data Stream? I know you guys work with Data Stream, right? So where's our insurance buddies, right? Because there's a list here: PCI 853, 80171, and the list goes on and on of acronyms, SOC 2, so on and so forth, right? At what point does the insurance industry start to again pivot and add more requirements, right? We know about 2FA and backup and firewalls and vulnerability management and policies. And at what point does the insurance industry now also start to require you need to do some kind of human-powered penetration test, right? I feel like that's probably coming. Now, I'm not a fortune teller and I am not deeply involved in the insurance industry, but our friends are. I should probably post them about that and ask them, where do we see this coming?
We are seeing, actually, I just was working with the Fifth Wall on a comment regarding that where they see vulnerability management is pretty clear, and penetration tests, I think, is, as you said, is making sense, right? To be close thereafter. We have seen in insurance. I've talked with the company EA Risk Partners, where they work with the big MSP or even smaller MSPs, and if the MSP is doing this level of stack, say a medium or a high performance stack, security stack, then you are eligible to get this level of premium, which is a lot lower premium, because they know you're doing the right things, right? So it's, penetration tests is the next thing that obviously, I don't know what the timing is, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if particularly some of these entities will be required.
So I digressed and went down the insurance route because, we feel like insurance is also driving a lot of this industry around compliance and requirements, right? We hear a lot. I want SOC 2. My customers are requiring SOC 2. The industry is asking, and the marketing ploys around everybody having to get SOC 2. Well, when you look at Principle 16 in a SOC 2, it talks about how are you doing this ongoing evaluation and internal controls, and how are you dealing with that on Principle 16, right? So what I'm getting at is, okay, everybody's jumping on the marketing SOC 2 bandwagon. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good starting point. But again, the scope. But there's a requirement in there for how the hell are you dealing with this kind of stuff? Does a penetration test satisfy that? Or does just an automated scan of something satisfy that? And I've been going back and forth with our auditing firm on what's the requirement? Well, it's kind of wishy-washy. How are you? And it kind of boils down to those principles, right? And when you're looking at these control principles, especially for a SOC 2, it's a little bit gray on whether a human-powered penetration test versus running Burp Suite works. In our opinion, or at least in my opinion, if you're building SaaS-based applications, if you're doing, kind of stuff around that, given the supply chain risks and all of the things that we've seen happening over the last several years, it's just good business practice. Is it expensive? Yes, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I really believe that, just running a scan, it needs to be more than that. You need to deal with the scans and the vulnerabilities, but you also need to try to actively exploit them, because they are getting actively exploited and we probably don't even know about it. Right? So any other questions? Let me go look in the chat here real quick on making sure we're not missing anything about the requirements. I'd love to hear from the audience, kind of as we're going through this. Feel free to pop up any questions as we're continuing to go here. We're about halfway through. We're going to get into, what are some of the findings? So we've determined now the difference between a penetration test and vulnerability. We've kind of talked about some statistics around that. We've certainly dove into requirements. Like, it's here, folks. Like, it isn't something you can just willy-nilly your way through, right? And now we've conducted a test. We've brought in an expert like Wayne to help us, and we've discovered a bunch of things. So, Wayne, what are some of those kind of top key things that tend to get discovered?
Well, we have a slide on that, Tim. These are just some of the top items that are discovered in network penetration testing. So you can look across here and see the very top one, and this is something that we can have more conversation on, is the security misconfiguration of servers. So this is something that relates back to the overall process and the need to do pen testing. You know, some companies think, wow, with pen testing, the process is so big, and it's a burden on me to fix all the findings when they come back, and how am I going to approach this in the best way? You can see here in reality, from real findings, that the number one issue is misconfiguration. So if you can put effort in your company into strengthening your system hardening processes, then you're going to reduce the misconfigurations. Pen testing is really a great process because it's proactive and it looks what can be exploited. But if you have a stronger process to keep your security configurations the way that they should be, then you're going to have much less findings in this area. So just one thing to think about, it's not only the penetration side, but the flip side is also being more proactive on the actual program to harden those systems.
So is it safe to say, by looking at both that data set and this data set, that the whole concept of not only just least privileged, but secure by design, secure by default would be something of great value and importance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. These are all great. But people just call them best practices.
And I'm teeing myself up here. Sorry, little plug. So, and this is really important because the National Cybersecurity Strategic Implementation Plan version 2 just came out on the 7th. Actually late on the 7th, so it's not even 24, 36 hours old. And one of the key things within here is MSPs are encouraged to integrate a secure by design or a zero trust principle, right? We're going to be doing a session about this tomorrow, so make sure you head on over. But the whole idea of the secure by design totally relates back to what we were just discussing on the secure security misconfigurations, right? On that whole conversation, secure by design.
Yeah, interesting.
So
well, I think but actually, I think the follow up to that is actually the next slide that Wayne's got, in terms of what kind of things are we really testing for, right?
Yes, exactly.
The different types of tests. So Wayne, if you want to walk through these, that'd be helpful.
Okay, I'll do that. Tim, if you can go back just one slide just for a second, I'm going to give you some credit here. So Tim brought up before the importance of the access controls. You can see here that is the second area of the most findings. So that's just something to point back, Tim. You had a really good point before.
Hey,
Tim, I got one right. I got one right. Well, so let's see. So 17% of the findings, but only on, 42% of the objectives. right? So 17% of 42 still feels pretty low, right?
Yeah. Yeah. These aren't totally aligned at this point, but this shows you where people's heads are, what they're
Right.
doing with the strategies and requesting. But in reality, maybe they should be more focused on configuration and access control.
Yeah, because the two top things here, access control and misconfigurations, which then gets really back into secure by design, right?
Mhm.
The new initiative, or the updated initiative put out by the White House literally yesterday. So, all right. So we wanted to talk about penetration testing types: network, apps, physical, social, emotional. Wait, sorry, I added an extra.
Well, that's the result of all four of these. If you do a bad job on these, then you're going to have an emotional issue.
Probably, yes.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was important that we spend a little time talking about the different types of pen testing, because very often when you talk to companies and you start talking about pen testing, they'll say, well, we test our external systems, or we test our external and internal. Usually external is a higher priority, but internal is becoming more and more of a priority, as you know, that people that get in your environment, by many means, number one is phishing. But if they get into your environment, you've got to know what could be exploited there also. But networking or network testing, testing of everything connected to your network has been really the traditional focus of when people say pen testing. Then I listed black box, white box. Basically, do you have the pen tester try to access your environment with no information, or are you going to give them some credentials, which would be the white box testing?
Yeah, I'm gonna pause here, right? Because that's another thing that we've talked a lot about. And sorry if you can hear the. I live near an Air Force base, and the Italian fighter jets have been doing touch and goes all week, which has been super cool, but they're super loud.
Yeah.
So what you were talking about, the authenticated and unauthenticated ability to test stuff, to test those vulnerabilities, right? Having going through this exercise, that plays into pricing too, right? That plays into, being able to actively exploit a finding, or, and the thing about the authenticated part is then the lateral movement, right? Maybe I can get in as a lower ranked kind of user, lower rolled, but then being able to take that role, and we see this happen, and pivot with more administrative access and more administrative, right? So they might take, I hate to use Johnny Janitor that's got the password of MOP, getting into the platform, and then using that and other potential exploits to then escalate their privileges along the way. So it's really important to look at both unauthenticated, trying to get to Bob's password of MOP, right? And then trying to then actively lateral move up and down the chain once they've gotten in, i.e. authenticated. So other pieces to consider when doing the types of penetration testing.
Well, I did want to give just a little advice, since we were talking about the black box and white box, and do you give credentials or do you not? My recommendation is for companies to get the most value out of the pen testing. Do give the credentials, because make the assumption that if the bad guys really want to get in your environment, they're going to get in.
Yep.
So, and the phishing is a really good, way that you can talk about that. Like, there's so much going on, but, somehow if the bad guys who are very well financed and they have time to do this, if they get in your environment, you want to know what they could do. So to give the credential gives them, the pen tester, the most chance to give you the information back about what could be exploited. So, if you're going to spend the money on pen testing, that would get you the highest value of what exploits could happen in your environment. So it's just a recommendation. Okay. So if you want to go, Tim, back to that slide, I'll talk about some of the other methods.
I mean, this one?
Yeah. So that's kind of an overview of network pen testing, but don't forget about the other kinds of testing. Application pen testing is something that can be very important. What I've done as a CISO is to identify really what are my key applications? What are those applications that have the sensitive information that really could be a big impact if they were breached? And, the application testing is much more in depth. It's more expensive, takes more time and planning. So you really don't want to just say, oh, just test everything. It's not a practical approach. But identify those few applications, budget to do some pen testing on them. And, maybe do, to start off just what you think is the most important one in one quarter, see how that goes, maybe do one in the next quarter, break it up, but prioritize it based upon your business needs. And as you can see here, I listed different types of different applications.
I'm all for the dumpster dive, especially the dumpster outside Dunkin's, because they have really good day old dump kit. But the USB drop, there was a big thing around, USBs being left in parking lots and shopping carts and airports. And I don't see or hear a lot of that much these days. I think people are wising up a little bit for picking up random USB sticks. In fact, as a vendor, and Frank, you could probably relate to this, right? Like, we want to be able to provide our conference goers with a bunch of great free resources, and I threw it out there 6-8 months a year ago, like, hey, I want to give you all a free package of documents or whatever, a free digital stuff. And I was like, but how do I do? I can't give away USB sticks, or no one has a CD-ROM anymore. Like, I literally have to make a web page, put all the stuff there. Like, I just want to hand you a thing and be like, here, take this thing for free. They won't, like, especially MSPs and IT professionals, they won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, right? So it's actually kind of, I would say, hurt us vendors a little bit, because we want to give you stuff. I want to give you a bunch of documents and a bunch of resources, but
instead we just have to tell them, oh, go to this site and look this up. Well, it's another 3 steps to have to do.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember several years ago, dating myself here might be when Office changed from the old version to the new version. What was that? In 2003, they had that major upgrade from point A to point B with the ribbon bar. And well, I worked with a company to create custom USB sticks that had a bunch of training videos and a bunch of resources on how to deal with the 2 versions. And then I handed them all out. I can't do that anymore. People won't touch a USB stick. Well, for the most part. I mean, yes, it happens, but I just find it interesting, the whole concept of a USB drop as part of the physical piece. We're about halfway through the slides here. I want to make sure that we cover the key topics. Anything more you want to talk about the pen testing types before I kind of get into some of the strategies?
Well, just one concept to talk about it on the dumpster dive, or I'm sorry, on the USB drop part. I totally agree that it's becoming less of an important thing to test for the corporate environment. Most companies are really educating their employees not to pick up those USBs, and most of them are turning off the use of USBs in their companies. But do consider that still the USB drops are very important when you're looking at the operational technology side of it. So if you're looking at a lot of manufacturing type plants, paper companies, auto production firms, power plants, all these are heavy operational technology shops. And a lot of these facilities are in small towns. And in a lot of those environments, most of the people in the town work for that company. So you can do a USB drop anywhere. You can drop it in the supermarket, and it'll find its way back into the company and the operational technology. And those shops mostly all still allow the USB drives because, that's how their vendors service them.
Yeah.
So if you're in that OT space, still that's an important pen test for you.
I mean, Lisa makes a really good point here, right? Like, they're not actually coming on laptops anymore. You're getting the USB-C things, right? So so that's actually, I think the industry, the hardware manufacturers, not only seeing that, like, hey, a little smaller lightning port versus a USB helps to make them more efficient, but I wonder if maybe the hardware manufacturers are looked at that as part of their, like, maybe we just remove USB ports now, because
I actually think it's more a cost and a space issue than it's been any.
I was making a really good point. No,
you're making a great point, Tim, but it's a concept. It's an added benefit. It's not a design focus. In my opinion, we've given a lot of hardware.
I probably guarantee. I hate to use the word guarantee. You're probably right. It probably has to deal with design, space, and cost. But if only the manufacturers thought secure by design. Oh wait, did I say that again? Where's my slide? So there's a great comment over here again from Daniel. Thank you so much. Yearly penetration, kind of going back a few minutes in time here, talking about how just the yearly thing is just a snapshot, a point in time, right? And so,
we've got a good solution for that. And one of the things that we do is it's more of a service called PenLogic, right? So it's a year-long program where you start with a comprehensive penetration test, and then we can add monthly baselines and sort of continuous. And this is kind of where we're talking the 1-2 punch between penetration testing and vulnerability management, is that you want to be, you could do the pen test monthly or some level of a pen test, but in between you can use a vulnerability management like Nodeware to check your work, right? To keep looking for new things. Because again, vulnerabilities aren't just once and done, right? They're, I don't know how many dozens a day that are being published and reported that we're keeping track of. And so you got to, there's more new things between those tests. So great point, Daniel, that, once a year is really not a sufficient model when you look at the 1-2 punch, but in particular with, the ongoing back and forth between pen tests and vulnerability. Wayne, you probably have some other great views on that as well in terms of the timing.
Yeah, I think it is really valuable to do pen testing, not just annually, but on an ongoing basis. And I think like you said, Frank, our program to do baseline testing to fill in between the more expensive, more in-depth, comprehensive manual testing really is a good solution to find that balance between, the high cost of the more comprehensive and the lower cost of the automated process.
Yeah, so we do see a lot, and hold on, I'm like, we do see a lot. Pen test as a service, right? I'm gonna pass. No, but reality is, and Daniel, you make a really good point. Like, we bring in a firm, they spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks, dozens of hours. They find all these things. They go through all these things. We mitigate all those things. They come back after 90 days and retest or whatever, and then they're gone. And then your developers, I don't know, save the encryption key in a text file in your GitHub by mistake. I don't know, whatever. That has not happened to us, by the way. But
specific there, Tim. I don't know.
This never happened to us, but I'm really good at coming up with analogies on the fly. So, they come in, they do the thing. You find all these holes, you fix all these holes. Yay, we're great. And then something stupid happens, right? Human error or whatever. Something stupid happens. You won't know about that till next year. If you do it again next year, who knows, right? And so, this concept of, penetration test as a service, I think is really going to start to be a big differentiator for MSPs, MSSPs, and MSSPs, and VCSOs like yourself, Wayne. It's going to be able to, have yet another quiver another arrow in your quiver, and be able to differentiate your services
Mhm.
from the one-off type of MSPs. It's going to be able to bring that value add as an ongoing thing, right? And we always say compliance is not a checkbox. Well, maybe testing should not just be a checkbox. Maybe
Mhm.
vulnerability management should not just be a checkbox. Oh my God, we're getting into continuous compliance.
Wow, we're getting deep now.
I know. So, but I think Daniel does make a good point about about it's not a one and done. In fact, I think IGI might have something around that.
Well, I was just going to help you tee that up there, Tim. Because it really does become it's a strategy discussion, right? And it's a understanding the needs, understanding the budgets, understanding the risks, and the willingness to take risks. So
I'm gonna interrupt you. Can we just stop with the acronyms? Coming from the acronym, no, I love it, but I hate it, but I love it, but I hate it, but I love it, but I hate it. Right?
Yeah.
As the acronym guy, like, oh my God, I can't even pronounce that, let alone. Yeah. So, anyways, I interrupted, but
go ahead, Wayne.
So talk a little bit about this CISO as a service, this CISO TAS, if I'm saying it correctly.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, our virtual CISO as a service, or we call it team as a service, because it's not just the CISO that's assigned to work with you, but it's also the team. So we can bring in people into the service as we need to accomplish what the client needs. So basically, this program is really founded on guidance from a trusted advisor who is your virtual CISO. So basically, by adding this service, you're extending your security team, basically adding a virtual CISO to your ongoing team, where you have, in my case, I serve in this role. So you have someone like myself on call, to go to your meetings, to ask questions, to basically be your person that you can go to whenever you want for advice and assistance and guidance. But on top of that, we offer, I kind of have laid out here in this word chart, different services that we offer. One of those is pen testing. But if you find that you're going to do multiple of these services in 1 year, so maybe beyond just having a partnership with a trusted security advisor, you also want to align with a security framework and have a roadmap to get there. Maybe you want to build incident response plan and you want to tabletop test it, or you want to build a risk assessment process that you can share the results with your executives. If you want to do multiple services, we find that it's far more effective and cost efficient if you are going with a program like this, because not only can you get done these key projects that you want to, that you may have just contracted out separately, but you can build the relationship and this ongoing extension to your staff with a trusted advisor. So I think it's just a great program. I'd like to talk to anyone more about it, but it's, on top of being able to offer pen testing, you could bundle it into a service like this.
So this is really great, right? So I'm a 1 or 2 person MSP. I have my customers. I recognize the compliance and security and insurance, like all these things are coming. And you know what? Like, I have a really smart technician. He's great. Like, they knock this stuff out of the park, but he's like, let me look. He's working on 800,000 million tickets at the moment. I can't do this work. But then I have our customers like, we need a pen test for our SOC 2 and all the things, right? So this is where, as an MSP, you can partner with trusted advisors like a Wayne, I could rattle off a bunch of different people. I don't want to name drop too much. But there are organizations, there are MSSPs, there are VCSOs that can come alongside you as an MSP and be able to provide these kinds of services, right? This team service offering, this VCSO offering to your MSP to fill in the gaps, right? Just like you fill in the gaps for your customer on managing computers and managing licenses and managing tickets, you fill that gap for the customer. Well, a Wayne can fill that gap in your stack, right? A CISO, a fractional, I like to use the word fractional as opposed to virtual, but that's a whole nother debate, can come in alongside you and fill those gaps, right? Yeah, like Lisa, Lisa and I chat frequently. She's part of our peer group. The idea of a partnership or an alliance. I recently kind of went through the whole, is it a partnership or an alliance? So there's a whole legal candidate. Anyways, I like the fact that we talk about this better together, right? I don't have all the answers. I mean, Frank does, but I don't. So I'm going to partner with a Wayne to make sure that the answers Frank's giving me, Wayne can do, right?
Yep.
All right, so we're coming up on the last 4 or 5 minutes. I want to give each one of you an opportunity to have like last thoughts, and then we're going to do our round robin of key takeaways. Frank, kind of last thoughts here, just kind of recapping.
I think kind of back to the point of it takes a village, right? Or an MSP can't do it all, and technically, right, and ethically and legally, they can't do it all. They literally can't. So I think they need to, understand kind of their limitations and their qualifications, and look for partners like us and you, Tim, on the compliance reporting, and search us out, look for us. As Lisa says, right, strategic business partner. I think that's a key takeaway. So I really like the emphasis on that.
Awesome. And so, Wayne, as we kind of wind down here, a little recap and a key takeaway, my friend.
Yeah, keeping the focus on penetration testing. The key tip, I would say, in your strategic planning for how you want to carry out your pen testing, think about your individual company, your priorities, your risk, and try to target what you're going to do with pen testing to help you identify what's exploitable in those areas. What are your risks? So if you have, if you're worried just about the network, that's the network testing, which I think is kind of like a foundational element. But, if you have certain systems that are high risk, think about the application testing for them. If you're, like we talked about, in a shop that allows USB usage, maybe it's the social engineering USB drop testing. But, you should design your testing, what you want to accomplish, to meet your business needs. So just think about that.
Good stuff. And as I kind of start to wrap up here, take my 1 minute and then leave Frank the closing remarks. Penetration testing versus vulnerability management. Both are the peanut butter to the jelly, right? They go hand in hand, right? And then you bring somebody in like a Wayne to take those two pieces of bread and make the best PB&J sandwich, because you can tell I'm a little hungry, right?
Let's go.
When as an MSP and you're considering these services, right? Partnering and having strategic business relationships with organizations that can provide additional services to you. It's okay to say we don't know what we're doing and we want help to fill in our gaps, because you know what? We're saying the same thing to our customer. Hey, you don't want to take care of your computers and your printers and your license into that. We can do that for you. So it's a very similar concept, right? Yep. Go and seek the help, right? You don't have to do this alone. That is why we do these webinars, so that you can get a little educated. You can find and understand how to operationalize some of this, maybe get some great partners, and start someplace, as I always say. Yep. And then Frank, What are we doing? What's
No,
coming up next?
I think no, I think I really emphasize the points here, and people interested, FRAIMONDI@IGIUS. If you have any questions for Wayne or I, just reach out to me, and we'll funnel them well. There's our contact information. But I think so. So this has been a great discussion. I love the definition. Hopefully, we've gotten some people thinking about, okay, now I know the difference. Now I need to understand, how do I apply it to my customers? And we want to help you do that. And one of the next session next week, next Thursday, same time, same bat channel, will be on a little bit more detailed on the vulnerability management and sort of the proactive proactive management of your devices. So thank you again for everybody for joining. On behalf of Wayne and I, it's been a pleasure to work with you, Tim, and look forward to the next discussion next week.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And yes, same bat channel, same bat time next week. We'll see you then. Everybody have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you all next week.
See y'all.
Subscribe now.